I have three simulation reports up. I have the 3-point Molly with working odds, the ATS, that's the all tall small bonus craps report, and another report. I haven't made a video for this, but it's the world's greatest strategy with tweak from Wayland's Way Craps. And what I'm going to do today is a little bit different than what I do in my normal videos because I want to spend some time going over the report and really talking about the data that's in the report. I'm intending to use this as a reference so that this is available to my simulation clients who have commissioned these reports. However, I'd like you to think through some of the data here and let me know if you think that there are other things that I should measure and if there's things that I include here that I don't normally include in my videos that you'd really like to see. I'll definitely make sure that I take that feedback and include those things in future videos. So let's start off with the 3-point Molly with working odds. And this is the report for a video that I did not too long ago. This was actually my last video. Here's the table of contents. The table of contents for all three reports is exactly the same. So we have an introduction. We get into some of the metrics about the house. Then we look at the sessions, the hands, the bankrolls, the comps. And then we start getting into, how long are the sessions, how long are the actual hands, as in how many throws of the dice. And then towards the end, there's the bet detail, which is actually splitting out all the different bets, which is pretty cool. And then the very end is the throws to profit table. So this tells you how many throws a shooter needs to throw before you hit a profit with this particular strategy. And later on in the video, I'm going to show you how you can actually get one of these reports for yourself and what the pricing is and how it all works. So stay tuned if you are interested in any of that. Here's the introduction part. We have two strategies that are in this report. Each strategy runs for 100,000 sessions with 1 million total hands, and that's because this one is running for 100,000 sessions over 10 hands each. There's 8.5 million throws, which is an average of 85.3 throws per session and 8.53 throws per hand. Now, I am using some updated terminology, and I wanted to really point that out to you today. A throw is one throw of the dice. A roll is the sequence of throws between pass line decisions. A hand is the sequence of throws before a shooter loses the dice to the next player. So I was previously calling this a shooter, but I'm actually going to start calling it a hand as of this video. And a session is a sequence of consecutive hands. Now, in this simulation, we have two different strategies that we're looking at. The first one is the default strategy, which has the odds turned off on come out rolls. That's the default for most tables. And the second is a strategy that has the odds always working on come out rolls. We're working on $50 units. The maximum is 5,000, but we don't hit the maximum in this particular strategy. And each session is going to stop after 10 hands. So it's not going to go beyond 10 hands. And really that means 10 different shooters are throwing the dice. So in the introduction for each one of these strategies, I have a little bit of information there. Now, what's interesting about the ATS is that we have two different strategies that I actually call them players here, but one of them is getting a lower payout while the other one is getting a higher payout. They're placing 555 on all of them, so it's a $15 total bet. And they are only replacing their bets on the next hand. They're not actually replacing them if they get lost inside a hand. So that means every player is going to have $150 total bet because there's 10 hands times $15. And the third one, and the reason that I included this is because it has a little bit of a different stopping condition. So in this case, here's the source. This is a video on Wayland's Way Craps. Let me actually show you this real quick. So it's this video, tweaking the world's greatest strategy. Did we make it even better? And that's the strategy that's being simulated here today. The bankroll here, we start off with $3,000. We have a win goal of $500 and a loss limit of $2,000. So when either of these conditions hit, that's when it's going to stop. And I wanted you to see that I do have the ability to have loss limits and win goals. I don't normally include that in the videos because I think that 10 shooters is a nice simple way to kind of give a quick average. Too many decisions. Sometimes, there's a win goal that could be higher, or the win goal could be lower. So I don't always include those things. But if you are commissioning a custom simulation, I absolutely can include those, and quite often do include win goals and loss limits. Okay, let's get back into the 3-point Molly with working odds. The second session is going to be all about the house metrics. So we have the total bet, the total won, the total loss, the house take, which is the difference between the won and lost, and then the house edge, which is the house take divided by the total bet. Now, this is always going to be a blended average. So remember, we're doing the 3-point Molly here. So you have pass line and come bets that do have a house edge, and then you have odds bets that do not have a house edge. But what this is doing is totaling up everything to get an overall house take and an overall amount bet. And that's how it's figuring it out. I'd also like to remind you that this is not a analytically derived house edge. So I'm not doing the math and going through all of it like that. What I'm doing is I'm getting the information that was observed from those 100,000 bots and totaling up all their bets, totaling up all their house take, and then doing the division. So it's what's actually simulated. It's not what's analytically derived based on the probabilities of the dice. Here's a section that I've added a little more recently, which is the drop. What this is doing is it's calculating how much actual money is coming out of the bot's pockets. Who gamble, that sometimes when you're betting, you're actually betting with your winnings. And what this is doing is it's figuring out how much actual new money has entered the casino. The reason that I put this in was to track this bet to drop ratio. And the way that you interpret that is that for every dollar that's bet from out of pocket money, $4.65 is bet out of winnings. And you can see for the always working players, they're having a higher ratio, which means that they're actually playing with more house money than the default player is. These numbers definitely change depending on the strategy. So if you look at the ATS, this number is actually a lot lower. So here for each dollar that's bet out of new cash, only 23 cents is bet out of winnings. And that's because, of course, the ATS bets are much more rare for you to win. And in 10 hands, you're probably not going to see a lot of wins. And therefore, that number and that ratio is extremely low. On the WGS tweak side, it's actually $14.50, and that means that you're actually playing with a lot more winnings than you are with the other two strategies. So that's it for house metrics, and then we move on to section 3, which is session level outcomes. Now for session level outcomes, remember our session is defined above. In this case, it's going to be 10 hands per session. Here are the overall outcomes. You have about 43.8, 43.7% that are up, that have won money, 0.9% that are even, 55, just over 55% that are down. Then we have the average win given a win and the average loss given a loss. So what that is doing is it's segmenting based on these 43%, 44%, how much on average did they win? And then the same thing for this 55%, how much on average did they lose? After that, we go into the distribution of the amounts that have been won and lost. What we do is we're breaking out the amount won and lost by session into different percentiles. So I have the minimum and I have the maximum here. Then in the central tendencies, I have the median and the mean. So it's always interesting to see the relationship between these two numbers because if they're very, very close, it means we probably have a little bit of a symmetrical distribution. If the mean is a lot lower, in this case, it's actually higher, but it's a lower loss, that's because we have a lot of outliers. And you can see that in the box plot. These are all outliers. I'll talk about the box plot in a minute, but the point here that I want you to take away is the difference between the median and the mean helps give you an indication of how skewed the distribution is. The percentiles on either side Notice that there is more information here than I normally show in the videos, and that's just to keep the videos a little simpler than normal. The first percentile is basically saying 1% of the 100,000 bots lost $4,100 or more. And same thing with 99%. And then you have the 5th percentile, the 10th percentile, 25th percentile, and then the corresponding 75th, 90th, and 95th. And if you watch my videos, you'll notice that I always describe this as the middle 50%, and then I describe this as the middle 90% because there's 5% that's chopped off on either side. That helps you get a better sense as to what to expect in a real game, because the maximum, even though it's interesting to see, it's actually pretty rare that anybody is going to actually hit that maximum. And if you look at the box plot, you can see that there's just one little point here, which is the 15,400, and the 14,500 is this point right here, 1 out of 100,000. So it is obviously pretty rare. The box plot. So the box plot, I like to use it as a reference to kind of understand the outliers, but let me talk about the middle. So this line here is the median. So that'll be the median here. This is the interquartile range, which is the middle 50%. And then these lines stick out 1.5 times that interquartile range. So they stick out on this here 1.5 times of the range of this box. And then anything out there is defined as an outlier. These outliers are overplotted, so you can see that they're a little bit darker, especially if we kind of zoom right in there. You can see that they're a little bit darker here, and that's because they're overplotted. There are actually a lot of outliers. It's not just one at a time here. But that's the definition of the outliers. And that's the box plot. Very quickly, I'm just going to show you some of the other, the box plot on some of the other ones. If you look at this one, zoom into this as well. Oops. If you look at the ATS, notice that this time our median is right down there. And you can see that here. Look at all these 150s. So our median is basically a loss of $150. The mean, again, is not directly on the median, and that means that we have a skewed distribution. These are definitely overplotted here because they're just very distinct levels that you're going to win. There's not a lot of continuous variation happening. They're very distinct wins that you're going to either win this amount or you're going to lose this amount, and that's about it. And let's look at the WGS tweak real quick. A little bit different here because in this case, you start to see a lot more up and less down, but your losses are bigger than your wins are. This one is especially interesting because, again, we have more winners than losers, so our median is positive, and our mean is way far away from our median. Usually your mean is going to be negative because this is not a fair game. There is a house edge to it. But what's really cool about this one is that there was a kind of freak win of almost $150,000. And I thought that was really cool because as I ran the simulation, I was looking at this and this can happen, right? There is no theoretical maximum. The theoretical maximum is infinite, right? In some universe, you might have a shooter who, makes 100,000 rolls without a 7. There's no law of the universe that says that can't happen. It's just very, very unlikely to happen. And when I run 100,000 simulations, sometimes it happens. Now, it's a very, very big outlier. It's very far from everything else, but it is a pretty cool outlier nonetheless. So that's the WGS tweak. Let's go back to the 3-point Molly and continue on. These are the histograms, and there's a histogram for each different strategy. So here we have the always working strategy, and then there's another histogram for the default strategy where the odds are not working. I have a histogram for each one, although some are more interesting than others. In the ATS, you start to see that there's, again, very discrete values. There's a lot of losses, and then some very small wins, and then some larger wins. And then you can see here in the WGS, everything's been kind of crammed down because of that big outlier. So you don't gain a whole lot of information here. If this does happen in one of your commissioned reports and you want to see a higher resolution, I can definitely generate that for you. But automatically it comes out like this because there's this one outlier that's kind of crammed everything else together. Okay. Next thing is session length versus win-loss amount. So I've been showing this in the last couple videos. We look at the number of throws in a session versus the amount that's won or lost in the session. And the reason that I show this is because I'm looking for these trends. And this is a good example of a trend where, 3-point Molly is a light side strategy. The more throws that a shooter is going to make, the more points you're going to make, which means the more money you're going to win. So we see this very, very strong correlation between the number of throws and the amount that you're winning. And in fact, if you get up to about this level, what is that, about 140 throws, you're almost guaranteed to be making money at that point. When you go into the ATS, it looks a lot different because, again, you have a lot of very discrete values. So your, densest area is down here, and there's a lot of losses here. You can have losses all the way up no matter how many throws because, again, because of the nature of the strategy is you're only laying the money out one time per hand, and a good hand, even if you lose this up front, you may not make that money back. And then you have these distinct groups because these are the distinct payouts that you have. You can see that these are a little bit higher when you get to the 175. So that's the relationship between the two of them. And then on the WGS tweak, this one also got really crammed because you have this major outlier. But you also see in general, you have a lot less of a trend. And that's the nature of this particular strategy, is that it's a little more flat. There are wins that, happen even at a relatively low number of throws. Some of the best wins is actually quite low. So you see that there's a little less correlation here between the number of throws and the amount won or lost by session. So I really like this one because it helps me kind of visualize and really understand what's going on when it comes to how long you're actually going to play. Now we're at section 4. This is the outcomes by hand. We could also say this is by shooter. So by hand is what I'm counting as a hand is as soon as you get the dice to when you lose the dice, that last 7 out. And this is essentially a copy of the information that we saw above, except now we're looking at it on a different level. We're looking at the 3-point Molly. We have about 30% that are up, a couple percent that come out even, almost 2/3, or actually a little bit over 2/3 that are down. But our wins when we win are greater than our losses when we lose. The Amt Won, again, we're going to see a difference between the median and the mean because this is a very skewed distribution. The percentiles are all exactly the same as what we had before, and we have also the same charts that we had before, but again, they're on a single hand level. So this way you can kind of get a sense as to what happens on an individual hand, because a lot of times you may not be playing for 10 hands specifically. You may be playing for longer, or maybe you even want to play for shorter. And in those cases, you want to know what you can expect on a hand outcome. On the ATS by hand, this one is a little bit interesting because on the ATS, you have 4.7% that are going to be up. This is basically the chance that the probability that the bots are actually going to win any of those 3 bets. 95% are going to be down. So I'm just under 1 out of 20 going to be down. This is also a very skewed distribution. Notice that the win given a win is very high as compared to the loss given a loss. You're always going to lose $15 because we're not going to replace those bets if they lose within a hand. However, if you win, you're going to win quite a bit.
Same thing as what we saw before. The median is all going to be down in these $15 levels. It actually goes all the way up to the 95th percentile because there's not a lot of variation happening here. And then you get in the 99th percentile and the maximum, you start to see some variation there. And you can see those groups here as well. Those are the groups that won the all tall or the all small, but not the make them all. And these are the ones that made both of them. We'll see more about that in the bet section later. The player that has the more favorable 175 and 34 payouts is the exact same percentage because the win rates are exactly the same. It's just that they're shifted over a little bit because of the higher winnings. And then on the WGS tweak, we see another similar story to what we saw before because we still have a lot of winners. You're more likely to win than you are to lose with this strategy. However, when you win, you're winning only $120, but when you lose, you're losing $160 on average. Again, positive median and negative mean, and we're pretty much always going to see a negative mean. Still have that crazy win over here, which again smushes down all of the histograms. So it's not a whole lot to see here. Next section is the bankroll. So bankroll, this is again one of my favorite sections because this was one of my biggest questions when I was trying to figure out what I was going to need or what could happen and all of that kind of stuff when I first played. Everything here is based on the out-of-pocket bankroll. What I'm doing is in the code, whenever a bot places their bet, I'm tracking, are they placing that bet out of like new money that they're taking out of their pocket, or are they placing that bet out of maybe an amount that they had won on a previous bet or an amount that maybe they took a bet down previously. And because they took that bet down, they have an extra $25 or $50 that they could use for a second bet. That would not count as out of pocket. Only like new money where they didn't have something in that kind of quote unquote bank would actually be considered an out of pocket outlay. So I start off this section by looking at the out of pocket outlay by hour. And I like to look at it by hour because, we're not always playing for 10 shooters. We might be playing at, for a longer session, especially even in this WGS tweak strategy where we're actually playing for a win goal and a loss limit. So I start off with 3 different table speeds, 100 per hour, 80 per hour, and 60 per hour. And I've kind of labeled those as empty, half full, and full. So a full table is going to be at a slower rate. And 60 per hour is going to be one throw every minute. 100 per hour is a throw every 40 seconds or so. 120 per hour is some of like what I've seen before quoted on the internet, but that's a throw every 30 seconds, which I think is a little bit high. Maybe that's correct, but anyway, this is what I chose to use those. So when I look at these, I tend to look at the half full and I compare the 1771 to the 1824 to get a sense as to how much more it's costing to play the always working strategy as opposed to the default strategy. On the ATS, it's going to be a lot lower because you're playing only $15 per hand, and that's $114 here. And then if we go to the WGS tweak, we're looking at $353 at that kind of medium table speed of 80 rows per hour. Section 5.2 is the quantiles table, same as what we had before. So, but this time it's based on the out-of-pocket outlay over the entire session. So in this case, I tend to look at the minimum. So minimum here is $100. You can never play with 0, right? Because you need some out-of-pocket money to walk up to the table and make that first bet. Now, in this case, the first bet is $50, and potentially you could win that first pass line bet, win a couple pass line come out rolls, and then never have to take another dollar out of your pocket. That didn't actually happen here, so it looks like it costs all of the  bots at least $100 to play this strategy.
the median and the mean you can see here, and you can see the maximum here. And I have the same information all in the histograms, and you can kind of see the shape here. These are pretty rare that you're going to get up above $4,000 out of pocket. There's a mode of 8.6% that looks like it's a little less than $1,000. And so that kind of gives you a little more of a sense as to how much it's going to take out of pocket. The ATS one is interesting, right? Because the minimum is 15. You might have won something right off the bat. There's a 30 because you might have won on the second attempt or the third attempt or the fourth attempt. So it's kind of interesting the way that it takes $15 steps up. But the maximum for all of them is going to be $150. Median is $150 because, of course, that's what is most likely to happen, is that you're going to put $15 down 10 times and lose it all. And you can see the histogram here as well. And on the WGS tweak, this one is also very interesting because you start to see the bimodal nature of this strategy. So you start to see a little hump here, then it goes down, and then you have a big hump here. And why is that? That's because of these win goals. So there's a win goal of $500, and then we're going to stop playing. And there's a loss limit of $2,000, and then we're going to stop playing. And because of that, you have this kind of bump here where the bots are not going below that $2,000 because of that loss limit. And then over here, there's they're stopping because they've invested enough and they've got their money back, so they actually don't want to continue playing anymore. Okay, then we have the same information by hand. Now, in this case, on the 3-point molly, you have the $50 because, for a particular hand, they haven't gone beyond that. And you can see all of that. Same information that we have before, except this is the out-of-pocket by hand. I'll just show you very quickly. It's always $15 for the ATS. And on the WGS tweak, it starts off at $150 and then starts increasing up to a maximum of $19.20. Section 5.4 is a brand new section. I haven't actually featured this in any videos before this. So this is win as a percentage of the outlay. This actually came from a viewer who wanted to know, what is the chance that I might triple my money? And this is my attempt to answer that question. So here, what this is saying is 43.8% of the bots made at least 1% of their outlay. 41.7% made at least 10% of their outlay. A third made at least 50% of their outlay. 26.2 made at least 100% of their outlay, and so on. Here, 11.2 made 3 times their outlay, and 1% made 1,000% or 10 times their outlay. That's for the default players. And then you can see the same information here for the always working players, where actually a little bit higher. So if you look at this 1.1 versus 1.0, 5.6 versus 5.4. So there's a little bit higher wins with the always working. And again, there's more at risk, a little bit higher wins that compensate for that particular amount of risk. Let's take a quick look at this for the ATS. So if you look at the 150s, 38.4% made at least 1%, 11.3% doubled their money, and 5.2% 10 times their money. And that aligns very closely with what we saw on the previous charts. On the WGS tweak, we have this same information here. So we have the 10%, which is 58.2% made at least 10% of their money. 50%, 48.7% made at least 50% of their money. 28% doubled their money. 4.2% tripled their money. 0.6% made 500 times, or
500% of their money, so 5 times their money, and so on. The next section, section 6, is the comp value. This is actually like a very simple, almost simplistic calculation of what might be appropriate for comps given the strategy. And I'm basically doing a couple things. One thing is I'm calculating an average wager per throw. I'm not showing it here, but in the back end for each throw, what is the average amount wagered? I'm excluding anything that's not working. So those odds are not going to be working for the default player, while they will be working for the always working player. Then I'm calculating the ADT, which is average daily theoretical loss. What this is the average wager per throw times a table speed, and then multiplying that by the house edge. The house edge that I'm using is the blended house edge. So I'm not doing this based on each individual bet. So even though the odds are actually a 0% house edge bet, we're using the blended amount, because you're actually should, in my opinion, given you're risking more, you probably should be getting credit for it. So I'm including it here. And then I'm taking that ADT and I'm multiplying that by 25%. And that's what's giving me the estimated comp value. So we have to do two things. I'm going to go to 80 throws per hour. We're looking at the half full table. And then let's say we played for 2 hours. On default, the ADT is $97.41. On the always working odds bet, it's $103.12. And then multiplying that by 25% gives you the estimated comp value. So that's what I have here. If you guys have any other suggestions for this, I'm not an expert in casino comps. So if you guys have more information about how that works and, what you want to see here, I'm absolutely open to hearing your ideas. I'll very quickly just show you the ATS one as well, because ATS one has a very high house edge. This player 150, remember the house edge is like 18%. It's over 18%. So your ADT is huge as compared to everything else. So you start getting a lot more comps, a lot more value in your comps, I should say. And then WGS tweak, I'll just show you that real quick. So here we only have one strategy. So the table is a little bit simpler. So we look at, say, 80 throws per hour over 2 hours. $160 is your ADT. That's what the casino expects you to lose theoretically. And that 25% of that is a $40 estimated comp value. Now we're on to section 7. So section 7 really talks more about the actual gameplay. We start off with the number of hands. Now in this case, that's all going to be 10, right? By definition, we're going for just 10 hands per session. Same thing with the ATS. It's going to be all 10s. But when you get to WGS tweak, it starts to change, right? Because we have our win goal and we have our stop loss. So if you look at this, our minimum is 2. So maybe we made all of our $500 profit in just 2 hands, and that's, and then you stop playing. Same thing up here. You can see these are lower, up until the 10th percentile, it's lower than 10 hands. Once you get up to the 25th percentile, it gets higher. And then we maxed it out at 300, which is a pretty long session. But notice that that's not typical. That's an outlier. It's really 133 here. Then we have the actual number of dice throws. So same percentile chart that we saw here. We have a minimum, we have a maximum, median and mean. Here it's going to be 8.53 as for your mean, just like what we saw up at the top. But on the WGS tweak, it's going to be a lot different because of that. So here we have 164. And you can see the breakdown here with the number of throws and their frequency here. Same thing here for the 3-point mully. The time at table tries to turn that information into an actual duration based on table speed. We know how many throws were made for 10 hands, but how long would that actually take? And here again, we have the empty, half full, and full tables.
And if you look at the median and mean, we start to kind of hover right around 1 hour. I think that that's one reason why a lot of us who, are doing videos like this are talking about 10 shooters, because that's just roughly 1 hour. Now it can be longer, right? Here's one that's at 3.5 hours, whereas some of them just burn through them in 16 minutes. But on average, you're looking at roughly 1 hour of play. Those will be the same for all of these that stop at 10 shooters or 10 hands. But here, this one is pretty crazy because, again, this was a commissioned one. So we're playing for a lot longer. And, you can see, like, look at this, 4 hours, even here, 1 day, 19 hours. Those are the maximums. So definitely pretty crazy. I have the same information for the number of throws per hand, so that the minimum is going to always be 2, and the median is always 6, mean is 8, and that's actually the 8.53. It's just rounded there. Maximum over it tends to be hovering around 100. Sometimes if I go for a very, very long simulation, I might get up to like 120, but usually it's roughly 100 and sometimes a little bit lower than that. The reason for longer simulations is that the maximum would be longer is because when I'm simulating more, there's more opportunities for a very, very long roll. So if I simulated like 1 billion shooters, I would probably continue seeing this number climb because there's just more and more opportunity for just the random freak roll that could happen. Same information for here for the time per hand. And I also have information on how many points are set by the shooter. This is another one I haven't really shown this in the videos. For the players that set 1 point, there was 1.8 million, which is 59.5%. Cumulatively, that's 100%. Everybody that actually shot set at least 1 point. These ones made 2 points, but they lost one of them. So they made their first point, lost their second. That happened almost a quarter of the time. Cumulatively, 40%, 40.5% set at least 2 points. And then same thing for third and fourth and so on. You can see the maximum here is 15 in this version. And then I think over here we went up. No, it's still 15 there. Let's check ATS. Yep. So ATS had one that went up to 19. So notice, there wasn't anybody who did 16, 17, or 18 points, but they set 19 points. So it was a nice session right there. Okay, let's go back to 3-point Molly. Now we're in the bet detail. So there's a ton of information here. Already I can feel this video getting very long. So hopefully you're still with me on this one. But anyway, so here I have so section 9 is the bet detail. So bet detail, here I have every single bet that was made in the strategy. And this is only resolved bets. So in this case, it's not going to include those bets those odd bets that were returned to the player. But of the resolved bets, we had 2.5 million bets for the pass line. Those won. I'm going to zoom in actually a little bit. Those won 49.3% of the time. They lost 50.7% of the time. House edge is 1.4, and on average, 3.37 throws. Now, the reason that I have that is mainly because I like to make sure that I check all of this information. So if we look at the Wizard of Odds for this one, we look at the pass line, expected rolls, 3.38 and 1.41% house edge per bet resolved. And that's exactly in line with what we see here, 3.37, 3.38. That's close enough for me. The pass line odds, 1.6 million, almost 1.7 million bets resolved. Here we have a 40-60. Here we have a 40-60 split for wins and losses. And we have a 0% house edge, 3.56 average throws. The combets are interesting because I split them out for the original combet versus the moved combets. So for the original combets, we had 3.5 million, and those win 22.2% of the time, lose 11.1. Together, that's 1/3 of the time, and they move the other third of the time. So, so here you can see that there's a huge advantage in terms of these wins versus losses, and this is the house edge. So it's in parentheses because it's negative. The house edge is very, very favorable on that come out roll. And it always takes exactly one throw to resolve that original combet because it's either going to win, lose, or move. Now, once they move, if we look at the 4 and the 10, now we have that 33-66, and that's because it's 2-1 against. And that 2-1 against is a huge house edge in the house's favor, 33.4%. And that, of course, is why you're not allowed to remove those bets after you've made them. The average throws is 4 for the 4 and 10. And then we get into the 5 and the 9. So here you have the 40-60 split, which, of course, is why the odds pay 3-2. And the house edge there, 20.3%. So very high house edge. Again, that's why you cannot remove your bet. And then on the 6 and 8, we had about 500,000 of those. And here it's 45 to 54%. A lot lower house edge on these ones, 3.27 average rolls. And then when we look down at the odds, you're going to see basically the same proportions, here as here because they're winning on the same throws of the dice. This, you're going to see some random variation. So we know that the average is, we know that the house edge is 0%, but there is random variation in the simulation. And because these numbers are a lot lower, you start to see a little more variation than we see with some of the other, these kind of things. That's what happens there. Let me just very quickly show you this stuff for the ATS because it's just, much lower numbers. You see 2.6% wins and 5% on the all-tall small. And look at these house edges, these just brutal house edges. Even on the favorable payouts, it's a brutal house edge. And average throws, 5.83. The full one is a little bit longer than the others. Same information, but now we're looking at the dark side. And I thought this was pretty cool because I can show you place 5 house edge of 4%. And then your buys, here we pay vig on win in this example. So we have very low house edges on the 2 buy bets. And on the don't come, we have, for the first time, some pushes. And we also have, pushes on the don't pass too, of course. And we have this brutal house edge on the come out rolls. But after it moves, the house edges all go negative. And there's a huge advantage to the player. And you see that here in these very high win rates as compared to the opposite that we saw on the last strategy. So that is detail of resolve bets. Now we'll go into win and loss per bet. This is my attempt to show where exactly you're winning and losing your money. what we have here is just like the previous section, we have all the bets listed out, and we have the two different strategies here. And what this is saying is 10% of all your wins comes from your pass line bet. 34% of all the default players' wins come from the pass line odds bet, and so on. What's notable here is that you have this pass line odds at 34%. That goes to 32% here because a lot of those wins are starting to move down here as a proportion because you have these active a lot more. You have these odds bets active a lot more than you do when you're always working. The percent of losses, basically the same thing. It's just telling you kind of where your amounts are lost. And I find this super interesting because sometimes you forget, where most of your risk is and all of that. So I think it's interesting to see all of this. Let's look at the same information for the ATS. It's very evenly split. The bets are all the same, 5-5-5. So your wins and losses are all pretty much right there. And on the WGS tweak, we see most of the losses here are coming from the don't pass and these place and buy bets. And that's because of the nature of the strategy hits these bets first before some of the other ones. And you see a very similar situation with the losses. And our last section, section 10, this is our throws to profit section. Now, I have shown this in my videos, but I wanted to really go into it in a little more detail than I do in most of my videos. Each row is a new throw. And the intent of this is to show how many throws do we need to be able to make a profit. We start off with 1 million hands. That's what we have in the simulation. It's 100% survival. Every single shooter is going to make it to their first throw, by definition. Then we have this section called Bankroll after roll, that after that first throw is resolved, what is the bankroll? The range is between -50 and up 50. Median is a loss. The average is $28 lost. There's 22% of all players are up. That means they have a positive bankroll. It's not including what is actually still on the table. It means what have they actually pocketed. So when they pocketed it, this is in your bankroll. And then the percent combined is what percentage both made it this far to this throw and are still up. So if we look at throw number 2, 1 million shooters, everybody makes it to their second throw. They might 7 out on that second throw, but they've at least thrown it. So we're at 100% survival. Now at this point, our range is between $350 lost to $300 won. You can see the median average here. 12.6% are up at this point. Now that's lower because they've been taking money out of their pocket to make those odds bet. They made those they made the pass line odds bet, and then they had to actually lay down a come bet. So that number is actually going down on the second roll because they have more money coming out of their pocket. Again, combined is 12.6 because we're still at 100%. On the third roll, now we've lost about 11.1% of shooters that 7 out after that second roll. So now our number is down to 889,000, 88.9% survival rate. Here is the range, and now we're back up because some of them are starting to win. And percent combined, this is always going to go down because this survival rate is going down. So what I like to look at is kind of where is that line of 50%? What's the point, if any, that you're more likely to be winning money than you are be losing money? And in this case, it's 8 rolls. Let's look at the same information for the ATS. So here, at what point are you 50% likely? It doesn't even happen. We're already at 73 rolls. Now, we did hit 50% at 91 rolls, but that's only because
only 2 players survived it that long. So I don't want to count that because it's just a freak of just a small sample size that made it actually that long. WGS tweak is interesting too because there's a couple, there's some hedging happening there. So actually takes quite a bit, 36 rolls to get there, but it does get there. Where we see that a lot of times that it doesn't get there is when we're looking at strategies that are dark side strategies, where a longer roll means a worse outcome. You're looking for those quick 7 outs, or you're looking for a 7 out within the first few throws. And if you're going longer than that, you're running the risk of losing a lot of money. Overall, that's what I wanted to show to you today. This is the simulation report that you get if you order a simulation. If you're interested in getting a simulation, go to DiceData.info, and then if you click services up here, you have a lot of information about the options that I have. Here's the comparison. You're always going to get 100,000 simulations. You're always going to get house edge. I'm on top of this stuff. I turn around as fast as I possibly can. Usually we're talking about a couple of days. And you can always set the betting unit. You want to do a $100 table, you want to do a $1 table, either one, they're all fine with me. The stopping conditions, I fix it for the standard at 10 shooters. And for the premium, we can do, customized win goals like what I showed you earlier. We could do $500 win goal, or we could do, a stop loss, or we could do all kinds of whatever crazy stuff you can think of. We can do it all. The report handling on the standard one, it's standard report. Premium, I have the option for keeping the report confidential. So if you have like a secret strategy that you don't want to share with anyone, please order the premium version. The bankroll, I track it from 0 on the standard version, but we can do things like specifying a starting bankroll and, with the loss limits and all of that when you order a premium version. And then table rules, we tend to use standard table rules here. But here, if you want to turn your bets on, have things working on different kind of rules and whatnot, or you want different kind of VIG calculations, that's going to be available on the premium option. Depending on how complex your progression or regression strategy, you might need to get a premium one, because that just takes me sometimes a lot more time to implement. So, if you're ever confused about this, just you can drop me an email, no problem, and no obligation or anything. Just click this contact us, and let me know what it is, and I can figure out exactly what it is that you're looking for. In all cases, you have an option so that you can actually compare a second strategy as long as we do it in the same run, similar to what I did here. So in this, I have the same run. I am running 2 different strategies at the same time, and that way you can kind of compare the 2 of them. So that is an option on both of them. Now I can do more, but it does get more complicated. So just let me know. Just contact me if you have a need for that, or if you want to do that, or you can order a couple of these. Either way, doesn't matter to me. I'm happy to work with you in any case. So that's what I have for you today. I know that this was a lot longer than what I normally do, but I wanted to give you so much more information than I normally do, and I appreciate it. Let me know your comments if you think that there's something that I should track in these reports that I'm not already tracking in these reports. Let me know. The other thing I wanted to mention is if you go to extras, we do have full session replays, and the data file downloads are available off of my Patreon. If it is something that you're interested in and you want to get more information, eventually this will all become part of the think tank. So if you are interested in think tank, go to thinktank.dicedata.info. And on think tank, here I am going to, this is my where I'm going to post all of these things that post all of these simulations that have so much more information. So that's the idea. Right now it's a waitlist. I'm really, really trying to have it done by the end of May, but we'll see how that goes. But if you are interested in there, definitely join the waitlist so that you don't miss it. All right. Good luck at the tables. Thanks for watching and take care.